in addition to IT staff, but 3 individuals from the courts. I've also reached out to the other individuals that are going to be utilizing our program and asked them kind of who they wanted to be the primary being trained on that programming once we get to that point. That's going to greatly help with our efficiency. Tyler's a great program as far as tracking, as far as it's going to run much more cohesively with the payment operations that the city is also utilizing with Tyler. We're looking forward to the probation aspect of that software because that's going to allow us to move from paper options to fully digital, which will allow us better tracking, better confidential file containment, and just allow us to track the individuals better, to provide them more rehabilitative measures, and to get them through probation. Through the COVID closure, we basically worked on doing things that had kind of been put on the back burner. When I first came to the city of Casper, I worked on forms for the public, which were approved through Bar Council, and I went through and we'd had some questions and kind of complaints that they weren't very easy to utilize. So I went back through and revamped some of those, developed some new forms that were then approved through Bar Council to just aid the public, because most of our individuals are self-represented. And so we just wanted to make sure that they're understanding the procedure, the resources are out there, pointing them in those directions, and making sure that just our citizens are taken care of in that aspect. We started utilizing the drop box over here at City Hall. So we send somebody over every day to collect payments. That's been a huge help. We also opened up calling in, so they're able to call in and talk to court staff and pay, which reduces the credit card fees. There's still people that pay online. We have a lot of payment options, but we've opened that up to be able to call in and just pay right with court staff. So that's been very helpful. That's the card point system that we've been utilizing. Although we saw a decrease in our April and May revenues in the courts, this last month in July, we were up $17,000 from last year. And I think that using the drop box and also the card point system, and also getting our warrants during COVID, we generated 458 warrants for failure to comply with provisions of court orders. And so that was a huge help in getting compliance to then get those fines that were ordered paid. To the forms that, going back to the forms that we added, we did a victims of crime reference manual. That was based on an Albany County form, and we generated that because there's a lot of people that call in asking about restitution from crimes that really didn't know how to walk through that procedure. And so we generated a form that walks them through that procedure, gives them a form to fill out to request restitution. There's also a lot of members of the public that don't understand how to ask for documents during the early stages of the proceedings, to then get videos and law enforcement reports and those sorts of things. So we generated a form that they can fill out that allows them to ask for those documents and then provide a copy to the city attorney's office. We've seen, since we've gotten the new envelopes that the police department developed as far as the parking, we've seen a huge increase in compliance. Our complaints that we've received as far as not getting the citations because they've blown off the windshields or anything like that have basically been reduced down to nothing. The complaints basically that we're receiving now is people that sell vehicles and forget to take the plates off. CPD also did a while back a press release on that, but that seems to be the biggest complaint that we're having right now. So that's been very encouraging. That move to that envelope that is very sticky has been a huge help. We're also looking at in the next year trying to expand our programming with regard to mental illness and addiction in our probation programs. We've been seeing a huge deficit in the ability for those that are mentally ill or homeless or addicted to be able to get the help that they've been needing. And so we're going to try to revise our programs to address more of those needs and see that if we can resource with entities in the public to provide a better service on our probation into things, getting the proper rehabilitation done. We've taken huge strides in the last couple years, but we have, there's a need there. And after discussions with the chief and with the city manager, I think we have a really positive vision that we can implement to greatly assist the citizens that are in the greatest need. We also have been looking at doing, I think it's very intimidating for people that come into the courtroom, regardless of the atmosphere. People just get scared and intimidated. So we're trying to generate a digital recitation of the constitutional rights and kind of just walk them through the high points of the court process, list out all the offenses that would qualify for court-appointed attorney, and do that basically before we come in to then, I will of course reread them their constitutional rights and make sure they understand those when I read the charges, but give them a more relaxed setting by which to digest that. And that's something that we're in the preliminary stages of getting off the ground. I'm hoping in the next month that we get that off the ground so that we can do a test run and see how the citizens like that, and if there's a better understanding and they're more comfortable with what the process is that they're going to be going through. So that's kind of where we're at for now. We've got this Tyler project is going to be a huge project for us, so I didn't want to get overzealous in our goals and then get bogged down with that implementation. So we've set these, 3 high point goals to kind of get accomplished in the next year, but I'm hoping we can get a few more things addressed. But like I said, I don't want to bite off more than I can chew, so this is a good point to get started.
Go ahead, Councilman Hopkins.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, when you guys talked about, you mentioned we have some better compliance for the parking citations. Do you have any feel for a number or a guesstimate where we're at?
I don't. I can look into it a little bit. It's mostly the main issue that we were having was probably 3 out of 5 people that would come in would say, I never got it. I never got it. And I don't hear that anymore. I never hear that. It's mostly, oh, I sold this car and I forgot to leave, that I left the plates on it and somebody parked illegally and I ended up with this summons. But I'd be happy to look into it and see if I can get some numbers out of there for you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
Anybody else? Councilman Huber.
Okay, I got the green light to come on finally. The electronic things that I heard you talking about, are any of those enhancements or improvements designed towards working toward getting into the full court system that the Supreme Court uses or anything? I didn't hear anything said about that, or do you know? Or
As far as the Tyler stuff goes, I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, so there's still a chasm between municipal courts and the Supreme Court full court system and all that. And I don't mean that in a critical way. It's, cities and towns have always gone this way and the state's gone that way on that. And I'm just wondering if there's been any movement to bring those things together.
I think we're closing the gap. I definitely think, since, of course, I came from a state court background, and so we try to run things very similarly to the state courts. And so I definitely think that the move with this system will put us closer. As far as exactly what they're doing, technology-wise, I don't know the answer to that.
There is no interlink.
No.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And that's the question I should have asked in the first place.
Councilman Bates.
Thank you, Mayor. Judge Lynn, I got to visit with you last week, I think it was, and I appreciated you taking the time. I got to hear some of this stuff that they are looking at doing, and just the things that they've done has been fantastic. And I was talking to her about social media and kind of getting them out there. We have social media for the police department. We have social media for the fire department, and put them in really good light. And what she's doing and what her team is doing is phenomenal. And so I'd like to maybe look at here in the future trying to put the court system more in the social media light, similar to the police and fire department, because something I can say, when I went there and spent half of the day with them, there was so much I did not know as a citizen, the things that they do, and also the help that they provide a lot of the inmates, a lot of people, as she mentioned, that with the mental illness and the homeless and addiction, and everything that they do is amazing, and nobody knows about it. So I'd like to ask council to consider here in the near future bringing the court systems into with Rebecca Ladd and something like that, to just show what they do and how well they do it. They get kind of a bad rap, and I'd like to see if we can reverse that a little bit. So thank you for your work. Really appreciate it.
Appreciate that, thank you.
Councilman Huber.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I agree with probably about 90% of what Councilman Bates just brought up. But the problem that we have is there are some very severe limiting ethical constraints about what the courts can do in terms of putting out the messaging like the police department or even the building inspector or anybody else. A lot of that, ethically, the courts simply cannot do without running afoul of some of the canons of the Code of Judicial Conduct and the professional codes that apply. And so that's a real severe limit on what you're suggesting. And I'm not saying that by means of disrespecting your idea or anything, because I think the courts do a lot of stuff. And if people, one of my experiences was that if people would actually come down and watch what went on in court, every time I would see somebody that would come down and watch for very long, they would just sit there and say, wow, man, we can't believe what all you guys deal with and how well this works and how well the system works and everything. Why don't you get the word out about that? And I'd have to sit there and say, well, because there are ethical constraints on what we can and can't do that way. And so that's the only caution that I would raise about that kind of a thing. But I think we got to keep that in mind. What the ethical constraints on the municipal court are totally different from every other department that we deal with.
Okay. Anything else? All right. Thank you.
All right. Great job. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Move on to the open container area. Mr. City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, good evening. The item relating to number 2, open container this evening, was proposed in part by the mayor with regard to the possibility of utilizing the new feature in the ordinances that relate to providing for an open container area, that which you'll recall allows people to purchase alcohol from participating businesses and walk through a particular, I'm going to call it containment area, if you will, for lack of a better way to describe it, without concern for being cited for open container violations for a specific period of time. The proposal that we put in your packet as it relates to a geographic area that this could include would be the corridor basically going from Collins up around by the David Street Station along Ash and over to the intersection that the library is in downtown, along 2nd Street downtown. We would propose that if council wishes to enact that containment area for the last few weekends of the summer, which, as you probably recall, would extend through Labor Day. We have the means by which that could be done this evening, if council wanted to amend the agenda this evening to make that happen. We included in your packet a draft resolution that could be used for that purpose this evening, and we've proposed some of our ideas that you could incorporate into the open spaces, if you will, of that resolution as as something to consider. But in the absence of private businesses coming forward and proposing a similar concept in permit form, council definitely has the opportunity to consider this as well. And so if council does have that interest, we would suggest that amending the agenda this evening with a resolution along these lines would be within your authority, and that would enable businesses who wish to participate the opportunity to do so for the next several weekends until Labor Day concludes. I have a picture of that containment area proposal that we can bring up on your screens if you didn't see that in the packet over the weekend, and Mr. Mayor, we'd be open for any questions.
Yep, yeah, okay. And I'll just make a real quick comment. You know, I've talked to a couple of business owners downtown that, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, Mr. City Manager, but the way it's set up now is that if a business wanted to have use the open container area, it would have to go through a resolution such as we're talking about right now. And so they would really kind of need to forecast in the future to a week or two out what dates they want to do it, so it can go through a resolution process. Well, we talked about doing it from Memorial Day to Labor Day just to try it out downtown to see how this is going to work, but essentially without anybody coming forward and doing it now, we're not going to find out this year, and because Labor Day is going to be here before we know it. So so what I asked City Manager about doing was to allow businesses to have this open container area through Labor Day downtown, and then have the chief report back to us and let us know if there's issues with this area. So at least we have some data this year as to whether this is a good idea to move forward with or not. So, Councilman Hopkins.
Just a quick one. We've got the map there. Are the red spots, are those indicated as pedestrian barriers or physical barriers? I didn't see a key that said what they were.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Hopkins, that's exactly what that would represent. Yep.
Thank you.
It doesn't mean that the streets would be shut off, but it does indicate the limits of the containment area for folks who would be, walking through the area with drink in hand.
Okay.
Councilman Bates.
I totally respect what you're doing or wanting to go, but I mentioned when we were passing this to hold off until next year because of COVID-19, because of this exact reason that it just wasn't gonna really happen. And I still stand by that. I think we should hold off until next year, and I know you'd like data on it, but yeah, I don't think it would still be enough data. I am on top of it right now. I don't think I can justify $7,600 worth of police overtime for such a short period of time with it. So, I'd say we hold off until next year and open it up with a bang somehow.
Okay. Councilman Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I basically agree with Councilman Bates on this. I just don't think we're in a safe environment where we should be encouraging people to be outdoors. And I'm in favor of the experiment. I'm in favor of having an open container area. I think the virus is still with us. We've been fortunate so far, but we're just asking for trouble if we sponsor these kinds of things and allow them to happen openly. So.
Councilman Huber.
Well, I agree with Councilman Bates and Councilman Powell on this. We're late enough in the summer this year that I just don't think it's a good idea to go forward with this right now for the reasons that they said. But also, I would, I don't want to do this as an experiment. I'm ready to go, not go as an experiment, but to just open this up and then back off if we have a problem with it. But I do not think it would be worth doing for a couple weeks this year, and number two, also the health concerns that I have. I just don't think this is the year to do this.
Councilman Bates.
And for me, I'm not worried about the health concerns. I think people are responsible enough to take care of themselves. I just, like I said, I think we're just a little too late this go around.
Vice Mayor Lutz.
Sorry, kind of a sidebar question. Did we ever figure out the insurance ramifications or requirements as far as associated with having this? Like, do the businesses hold insurance? Do we hold insurance that's additional, or does our current insurance actually cover items like this?
Mr. Mayor, Madam Vice Mayor, businesses that participate in this would have some concern with regard to liability, and I suspect that they would understand that if indeed they decide to participate. As far as the city goes, it's my impression that the city will not incur additional liability unless, Mr. Henley, you would correct that view. Okay.
Okay, any other comments? So we ask either to amend it tonight, and if we get a second on that, we can, correct?
Mr. Mayor, I would say that is correct. An amendment opportunity could be offered, and if you have a first and a second, the agenda would be amended, and then indeed the resolution would be voted up or down.
All right. Well, knowing I'm going to lose this anyways, but I will make that amendment to amend it for tonight to do the open container for the rest of the year, just so we can see how this is going to work. So do I have a second? Okay.
Technically, we can't vote on anything in this pre-meeting.
Right.
It's strictly good.
Well, we have to, we're
Mr. Mayor, the first and the second would likely need to be called in the.
on the floor?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
That was what I was getting at, Mr.
I got you. Councilman Bates.
Councilman Johnson and Pacheco just arrived, and I think he was kind of wondering what we were doing. So if you want to.
So we passed the open container to where a business could ask to have the open container area, but they would have to forecast into the future and have a resolution come before us before they could actually make that happen. So they'd have to look at a date in the future. We planned on running it from Memorial Day to Labor Day. So what I asked was that we would allow that to happen the next remaining weekends until Labor Day, so that we could have an open container area to see, use it as an experiment to see if it's actually going to work or not. But it sounds like the flavor of council is not, so that's where we're at. Okay. All right, so then, anything else on the open container? Okay, we'll move on to agenda review. Mr. City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, the only thing that I would have for agenda review tonight would be with regard to the amount of amendments that members of the council have suggested could potentially be considered this evening. In my count, there are 6 that could be potentially considered this evening. And so we thought it would be helpful if council could go over those this evening prior to the floor discussion, if you will, to get a feel for what those are and if there are questions or interpretations that need to be provided. The pre-meeting would be a great time to work through some of that. That's all right.
It is.
And I'll probably defer most of this to the attorney to go through. Indeed, some of the discussion that was had last week would cover items 4 and 5 under 6.04.210 section D. The 4 and 5 items were with regard to elements to protect the animal from additional cruelty that inappropriate tethering might bring. The attorney has proposed an additional sort of technical amendment entitled Amendment 2, if you would. Mr. Attorney, do you want to go over that?
Certainly, thank you, Mayor, Council. Basically, we have a packet here of amendments 1 through 6. Number 1 is the city manager said you discussed at some length last time around, and nothing has changed in that regard. Amendment number 2 is basically an effort to, there were some numbering changes since we added and took away some different provisions. And so there are some numbers that needed to be changed and updated because they had either moved forward or backwards. One of the provisions had actually been eliminated. So we have those in under police canine exclusion exemptions. And then under the dangerous animal, the second part of Amendment 2, basically we've, that's another numbering change from 604.010.16 to 604.010.19. And there was a spelling error in that we had bearing teeth like a bear with big teeth, but this is actually bearing teeth, B-A-R-I-N-G. And so I'm hoping that that one of you, perhaps Councilman Pacheco, would do that tonight. And then we had some additional amendments that we had posted, and they were primarily raised by Councilman Bates. And I don't know if you would like to discuss those. You want me to go through them basically, Councilman?
Either one.
I'll be happy to if you like, and then you can just maybe correct me. Would that work?
That sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. So, amendment number 3, last week, before the meeting got started, I visited a little bit with Councilman Huber about whether private individuals or private organizations could conduct their own trapping, neutering, and release programs. And I said, oh yeah, I don't think that there's anything in the amendment or in our ordinances that would prevent that. But in fact, there was. So this was really a good catch, I thought, in that basically we had provided in the ordinance that animals captured that were non-domesticated must be turned over to the Metro Animal Services to be either returned to their owner or try to be adopted out or perhaps euthanized. So this proposed amendment actually lets private organizations set up their own trap, neuter, and release program, or private individuals set up their own trap, neuter, and release option. And so it doesn't put the impetus on Metro Animal Control, and it doesn't mandate that Metro Animal Control establish a trap, neuter, and a release program. But there could be 2 or 3 different people or individual organizations here in town that may want to do that. And so that is what proposed amendment number 3 seeks to accomplish. proposed amendment number 4, this is kind of a part and parcel, I believe, of amendment number 3. And again, Councilman Bates suggested this, and in this particular instance, there were provisions that were discussed earlier about the prohibition of feeding feral cats or dogs, and that was the way the ordinance comes to you tonight. This amendment, in essence, says that that people can feed feral cats and feral dogs, and that they would not be considered, for purposes of this ordinance, non-domesticated animals. So, I think Councilman Johnson had some concerns about, making that criminalization of feeding, wild cats and dogs. This would take away that concern of his, but obviously there'd be pros and cons. And do you have some other thoughts on that, Councilman?
Not exactly. I wanted to remove the criminalizing, but also B, people are going to feed them anyways. It's also going to, the fear that they're going to go after other animals within the neighborhood, which could move along diseases from animal to animal and cause even more problems in that aspect. So I just ask that the feral dogs and cats are considered as non-domesticated animals. So that John pretty much hit it.
And Mayor, thank you. If I can proceed, proposed amendment number 5. Basically, Councilman Bates had recalled when we initially discussed this, we had some concerns or some thoughts about chickens in the city, and the number of the chickens came up, and I do remember some discussion at that time, well, maybe ducks should be included in that option that the chickens have, and I don't know that the council gave thumbs up, but in any event, this proposed amendment would let ducks be on equal footing, so to speak, with chickens, and so therefore people could have 6 chicken hens, or, and it's an or, 6 ducks. One or the other, and so the requirements with respect to chickens, maintaining their feed in an appropriate way, maintaining that they be protected from predators in an appropriate way, all of those requirements that would be applicable to chickens would also be applicable to ducks, and that's why this looks like it's relatively long, but basically in those provisions that would apply to ducks as well as chickens, we inserted those and then made the word changes where necessary.
Yep.
And finally, proposed amendment number 6. Again, this is going back to the definition of neglect. And I believe we talked about earlier, and the city manager talked about paragraphs 4 and 5, and that these would be additional requirements that people would have to comply with. And they were particularly concerned with tethering, and that it be done appropriately. Councilman Bates came up with 3 other paragraphs, which we basically kind of assumed that 4 and 5 would be adopted by you, and then so 6, 7, and 8 would be new, and that basically, and then that food and water should be provided, but it would be in non-spill containers, because probably the tether itself would be knocking over some type of a food or water container particularly. And then the requirement for escaping severe temperatures and weather must be provided. And then this was an interesting one, I thought, because it kind of looked at the special circumstances of the owner's housing options. So if an animal owner actually had a fenced yard which would contain the owner's animals, the amount of tethering would be diminished to 2 hours per 24 hours. Whereas if the owner did not have a fenced yard which would contain the owner's animals, then the animals could be tethered for no more than 10 hours in a 24-hour period. So, I think that those were the sum total of the ordinances that, or the proposed amendments that we had for the animal ordinance tonight.
Councilman Pacheco.
John, when you want me to make that amendment, you'll give me the nod.
That's good.
All right, that's all I need. Just give me a wink and a,
Thank you very much.
exactly.
Councilman Bates.
So, I've done a lot of studying, a lot of looking, and I know that some of the stuff that I'm proposing isn't perfect. I figured it's a good compromise, or it's at least a start, especially the tethering. If you have a fenced-in yard, there's no real reason for you to tether other than when you have somebody over for dinner, you want a barbecue, you don't want the dogs in people's laps and all over. So I think tethering at that point in time, and or, you know, if they choose to lock them in a room, but if you got a big dog, tether them. I think that's sufficient. As it was brought up before, if the wind blows your fence down and you can't get to it till the weekend, or a company can't get to you for a couple of weeks, what do you do with your dog? And so I look at it as that gives option. Or there are a lot of good people out there that don't have fences, that treat their dog extremely well, that do need to tether them. And I think this gives them an opportunity to do that. I mentioned the feeding ban, the ducks, that has been brought up by numerous of people. Duck eggs are healthier, they eat bugs better, blah, blah, blah. But I thought that was needed to be in there. The only thing, John, that somebody brought up about the TNR is, and I don't know if I can just change the wording a little bit on that from TNR to maybe something like TNRR. And the reason why is because they pointed out people will do the TNR trap, neuter, and then just release them into any neighborhood that they were not originally at. And they are, cats have their own domain and their own area, and so it's more of a trap, neuter, release to the same location, or to, I'd have to look at the email, but anyways, release to the same area as far as that goes. So I don't know if anybody, you'd hope that people will do that, but I had seen them going, I don't want to go clear over there. I'll let them out at this street here.
Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I really appreciate the work that's been done here, and I think there's a lot of good options in here for council to consider, and kind of a middle road to look at some of these complicated issues. The one thing I would remind council as it relates to the classifying feral cats and dogs as domesticated animals, if I'm understanding that amendment correctly, basically.
Domesticated animals.
So, am I to understand, Councilman Bates, that the ordinance would allow for the feeding of non-domesticated animals?
For those two. Not, so deer and all that they would still be there. It's just the feral dogs and cats would be still allowed to be fed.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. The challenge that presents for staff is when the options of trapping and releasing and taking them to Metro and so forth are not working, and those animals are showing up in neighbors' yards and potentially damaging neighbors' yards and potentially trying to enter non-feeding or friendly homes to these animals, or neighbors' pets that are domesticated are being terrorized by the feral animals. They have no options after that. And there are instances where the retrapping and releasing doesn't eliminate those feeding sources and potential invasion of neighboring properties. And so I would suggest that if we eliminate that, then those folks who are neighbors to these types of feeding areas have no more options when the trapping possibilities exhaust themselves. And so I wanted council to be aware of that and understand that that would be a nuance, if you will, if indeed that amendment is adopted this evening. And that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Huber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I might be the only one in the room that was not smart enough to track through with all of these potential door number 1, door number 2, door number 3, and that Mr. Henley very ably went through. What would help me, and I know that it'd be a little bit of a problem, but if I could see those in printed out form, so that when we're going through these, you know, it'd be a little easier for me to look at. If that wouldn't be too much, and I know that it's tough to, it's easy for me to ask for that, but hard to produce that sometimes. But, you know, that'd really help me out.
Mr. Henley.
Great, thank you. Would anyone else like copies? I can certainly run those, no problem at all.
Basically, if we have our packets, they are on pages about 111,
109 through
109 through, yeah,
115, I think it is.
114.
Well, and I'm sitting here looking at those, but it's difficult for me to say, you know, okay, which part of this is which proposed amendment, or was this all just going to be one gigantic big amendment that was going to be proposed, or what? Because these things deal with all kinds of different subjects.
Oh, it does have them broken out. It says like proposed amendment 1, next page is proposed amendment 2, next page is proposed amendment 3.
Yep.
Yep.
And I was assuming that they were going to be brought up in that manner.
Yes.
So that we would have 6 votes.
Never mind, John, don't make me a copy.
Amendments.
Okay, well, and if we can be assured that they're brought up in that order and everything, yeah, okay. One other question, I had thought that at our last meeting that we amended in some language that said that in any event, animals that were tethered could not be tethered in a cruel or abusive manner, and I was having trouble finding that language in any of these proposals, and I want to make sure that that language stays in there. That it's in anything that we pass as a final draft. It might be in there and I just couldn't see it, but.
Councilman Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a couple letters from folks that brought up a different thing than TNR. It was TNVR, and they mentioned vaccination. And I just kind of wonder if we're leaving that out. And the other thing I wonder, we've never talked about, are these animals going to be chipped if they go through our animal shelter? So you can know that you've had this animal in there 3 times. Just food for thought.
Mr. Manager.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Hopkins, as our programs start to coincide with a TNR program, it would likely be our interest to want to chip animals, but typically we would chip animals when ownership is in place versus just open range release, if you will. But nonetheless, where we can and it makes sense, we would be happy to participate in that aspect of it.
Vaccination, don't we require animals that are adopted to be vaccinated?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Hopkins, we do. And I suspect it would depend on how the TNR program is designed in terms of what funding could be made available and that kind of thing. And so certainly I think that can be a component of it as well.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Manager, I have a question, and maybe I missed this in the last 2 readings of this, but is this the first time that we've had an amendment come up dealing with ducks? And if so, if we're going to make a change like that, does it not need to go through 3 readings, or can we just make a change like that on the fly?
Mr. Mayor, you are correct. This is the first time that this has been brought up for consideration among the council, but it is not necessarily unable to be done, in that if council would like to consider that aspect of this body of the part of the law, then indeed council can adopt that amendment this evening. If council feels like they don't have enough discussion about that element, then we can certainly bring that aspect of it back to a future work session and then run it through its own individual process if council would prefer.
Anybody else? Councilman Huber.
I don't know for sure how to ask this, but if we're going to engage, if there is support to engage in a massive wholesale re-amending of this proposed amendment to our existing ordinance, I'm seriously, and you guys all know how much I hate the idea of, well, let's table this and try to work on it some more. But if there is support to do these, or try to incorporate these pretty massive changes, which I would urge that we not do. But if there is support on the council to engage in these big amendments, I think that'd be a little bit risky to try to do that on the fly in a meeting on a third reading. Because if we pass that on a third reading, it's not like a first or second reading where we can easily come back and say, whoa, you know, we wish we would have thought about this word or that word. If it was on a second reading, I'd say let's go full speed ahead and fire the torpedoes. But on a third reading, if there's enough support on the council to try to do these great big huge amendments, really changing the character of the whole thing, you know, maybe we need to put that off.
I would agree with what Councilman Huber just said. We're trying to make 6 amendment changes, or we're proposing 6 amendment changes on the third reading, and I think that's ridiculous. We should have further discussion on it. Councilman Pacheco.
Yeah, I agree with Mike and with the mayor, and I think it's probably a lot. I'm feeling, even though I was gone for a week, so feeling overwhelmed with this, then I feel like I want to do it justice. Then we're going to have that conversation, but that's a lot of amendments to have to make on third reading. And I've been I've sat in that chair when we've been doing on the fly, when we're doing amendments, and it is not when we're trying to figure that all out. And I'd rather have more discussion in a work session where we can sit down and have more of a conversation about why are we going this direction, what the best interest of it. So I'm in favor of that as well. So,
Councilman Huber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If we decide that we want to table this and try to work on it some more, I think that it would behoove you, Mr. Mayor, to somehow or another to explain to all these good people that are outside here expressing their views on this, that we appreciate the fact that they were here today, and that we're not running away and trying to cower from them and going to try to do something behind their backs or anything, but that there are these 6 comprehensive amendments that people have indicated they want to bring up, and we want to take time and go back through and comb back through them. I would just suggest that somehow or another we make that information known to these nice people that are out here, that came down here expecting something to happen tonight.
Councilman Bates.
And I'm fine with pulling back the duck aspect and the other ones going through. I guess we hold off. Current one is the tethering is 24 hours. And when we finally bring this back up and discuss it, it means that that stays in place. This all went out on Friday in our packet. We had plenty of time to read it. Anybody could have got a hold of each other or called John and said, hey, where's this coming from? It could have been brought up as far as that goes. I strongly disagree. I'm fine with saying the duck thing, let's take it off. We'll look at that later down the road, but the other ones, I actually strongly believe that we should move forward with at least the tethering, the feeding, the TNR, and so forth, so.
Vice Mayor Lutz.
Just to be clear, because I don't want this to get misconstrued, the ordinance is as originally documented until like 21 days after third reading. So tethering is not at 24 hours currently, it is at 2 hours currently, and that's how it stays until we've passed third reading, and then 21 days after that, just so that's known in the community. The only other thing I'd say is, in the year and a half I've been on council, this is now the second time that we're redoing this ordinance. I'm not comfortable with tossing some things to the side and saying, oh, we'll deal with this in 6 months or a year. We're dealing with it now, and if that means we have to table it and make it right before we're done, then that's what we need to do. We shouldn't be redoing this ordinance every single year unless it's absolutely necessary, and pushing it through before we're ready is not necessary.
Councilman Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I tend to agree with what you're saying. There are some significant changes. There are still some questions in my mind. And a third question that I didn't mention before, I've had several people tell me that they're very, very interested in phone calls to get a TNR program started that's independent of taxpayer dollars. Should we decide to delay what we're doing a little bit, these people seem pretty adamant about trying to get something together. And based on the amount of input that I've had from my email, it sounds like it's a possibility. This would give them a chance to get their ducks in a row and come back and perhaps have a proposal for us that would be less costly to the taxpayers.
Councilman Powell.
Thanks, Steve. I think I do understand these changes, and I'm fine with delaying if that's the consensus of council. I would be comfortable, and I like some of the compromises that have been arranged, particularly on the tethering issue. I guess I'm wondering, my question for you, John, is would it be possible for us to vote to postpone the third reading after the public hearing rather than before, so all of the folks that took time to come down here would still have an opportunity to speak? Or would that violate our Robert's Rules of Order?
Yeah, I think if you're going to postpone, you would do that right off the bat, but you could tell the individuals that came to speak if they want to speak at the beginning of the meeting as opposed to simply waiting because they're, the thing's going to be likely, of course, it's not voted on right now, but it seems like there seems to be a consensus to push this back to a date certain.
So we would just basically suspend the directive that they should wait and allow them to come forward at the beginning of the meeting rather than wait for that issue to come up.
Yeah, I think that would make some sense given kind of the direction of the council, but that would make, it just seems to me that would be appropriate, and that would let them speak if they're here and they know where you are, and they kind of can see, I think, from this public work session where it seems like it's going. Mr. Mayor, if I could have one more. Councilman Huber wanted to know if that language is still in there under neglect, and it's 6.04210, and it does talk about proper shelter and food and water and protection from the elements and that type of thing. So that's still in there, Councilman.
Well, but what I was looking for is the language that I thought we had amended in at the last meeting that would include under the tethering that in essence, in any event, no animal may be tethered in a cruel or abusive manner. And that's what I wasn't seeing. And my memory was that we had, that I had moved to amend that in and that we had done that. My memory might be faulty on that.
I think everything that we passed was actually in the body of the memo, and I know you had 2 amendments that did pass, and those were in the body of the memo, and we had three that did pass. But I don't remember that one specifically. And that, if that were there, like I say, if it was not included, because I wouldn't have heard that get passed. And I don't remember that getting passed.
Mr. City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, I think the closest that we've come to that so far, Councilman Huber, is by offering amendments that clarify what would be considered a cruel and not appropriate practice for tethering. And so some of those amendments really sharpen the point in that regard, but I would have to concur with the attorney.
Okay, anything else? All right, we'll wait for the vice mayor to come back and then we'll get started. Okay, we'll get started here. All right, before we begin this evening, I'd like to remind everyone to silence their cell phones at this time. And I now call the August 18th, 2020 regular council meeting to order. Could you please show that all council members are present?
All council members are present.
Council meetings are also televised and can be viewed on cable channel 192. Can you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'm going to ask for a moment of silence. Carol Crump, a longtime servant to the Casper community, passed away yesterday. I say she was a servant because Carol was one of few people who worked tirelessly to make our city a better place. She served on the Casper City Council from 1995 to 1998. She was on the CATSI Board of Directors, the Memorial Hospital Board of Natrona County, the Wyoming State Advisory Council on Aging, the Civil Service Commission, and the Director for the Wyoming Dementia Care, to name just a few. Carol will be remembered not only by her dedication to service and hard work for the causes in which she believed, but also for being a kind, intelligent, generous woman who overcame her struggles with humor and love. Our city is a better place because of Carol. We will miss her greatly, and we offer this moment of silence to honor her legacy. Thank you. The chair would entertain a motion to approve by minute action the minutes of the August 4th, 2020 regular council meeting as published in the Casper Star Tribune on August 11th, 2020.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Bates, second by Vice Mayor Lutz. Any amendments? Any abstention or nay votes? All voting aye.
Aye.
Please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passed.
Chair would entertain a motion to approve by minute action the minutes of the August 4th, 2020 executive session.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Pacheco, second by Councilman Bates. Any amendments? Any abstention or nay votes? All voting aye.
Aye.
Please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passed.
Chair would entertain a motion to approve by minute action the August 18th, 2020 bills and claims as audited by City Manager Napier.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Johnson, second by Councilman Bates. Any abstentions or nay votes? All voting aye.
Aye.
Please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passed.
Okay, we'll move on to bright spots in our community. We'd like to welcome Tony Woodell, Director of the Wyoming Food Bank of the Rockies, to our meeting tonight.
Mr. Mayor,
Good evening, sir.
council members, I am Tony Waddell. I'm the director of the Wyoming Food Bank of the Rockies. As you all know, we've been faced with this COVID situation for some time now. And I wanted to share with you all that through the efforts of the Wyoming Food Bank of the Rockies, over the months of April, May, and June of 2020, we have delivered over 3 million meals in the state of Wyoming. Part of the effort that we have is related to partnerships with the food pantries that are located throughout the state. And we're very fortunate to have many of those partners right here in Casper. We are a proud partner with almost all of the food pantries that are located here. And we continue to uplift the need of food distribution throughout the state of Wyoming, and especially here in Natrona County, and especially in Casper. And through that, we've asked the council to consider that September is Hunger Awareness Month. And so we're asking that through that, the council recognize hunger awareness, and that also we look to promote that throughout the city and make everyone aware of the needs that are inside our community and also around the state. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I would ask you to consider the recommendation and the proclamation.
And with that, I'd ask you to come up here and I'll read the proclamation. Okay, a proclamation. Whereas addressing the food insecurity needs of children, youth, men, women, seniors, active military, and veterans today is fundamental in the future of Casper. And whereas hunger and poverty are issues of vital concern in Natrona County, where 12.7% of people struggle with hunger and 1 in every 6 children do not know where their next meal will come from. And whereas Wyoming Food Bank of the Rockies, a member of the Feeding American nationwide network of food banks, and their local partners provide over 12 million meals across Wyoming annually. And whereas it is our responsibility as citizens of Casper to learn about hunger and to do our part in reducing hunger 1 meal at a time, either through donations, social media shares, or volunteer shifts. And whereas Wyoming Food Bank of the Rockies, its generous funders, volunteers, and local partner agencies are committed to educating citizens on the role of food banks in hunger relief efforts and to bring awareness to the need for more resources and attention to hunger and food insecurity issues in our community. And whereas the month of September has been designated as Hunger Action Month in order to bring attention to food insecurities in our communities. Now therefore, I, Stephen K. Friel, Mayor of the City of Casper, Wyoming, do hereby proclaim September 2020 as Hunger Action Month and encourage all citizens to increase their understanding and awareness of food insecurities and how it impacts our nation, state, county, and communities. In witness thereof, I hereunto set my hand and cause the official seal of the City of Casper, Wyoming to be affixed this 18th day of August 2020. Thanks, sir. Okay, and I have another proclamation to read tonight. I'm probably going to mess this one all up, but that's all right. A proclamation for gastroparesis, which translates to paralysis of the stomach, is a chronic stomach illness that slows or stops the movement of food from the stomach to the small intestine in a normal fashion and affects more than 5 million people in the United States. And whereas symptoms of gastroparesis include debilitating pain, nausea, vomiting, early satiety, abdominal bloating, unpredictable blood sugar changes, and can lead to serious complications such as malnourishment, dehydration, extreme weight loss, overwhelming fatigue, and decreased quality of life and possibly death. And whereas, as there is little awareness of gastroparesis, no known cure, few effective treatment options or medications, Gastroparesis Awareness Month provides an opportunity to encourage greater understanding of gastroparesis in both the general public and medical community. And whereas the City of Casper encourages further research to discover improved medications and additional treatment options with better support for those afflicted by this disease. Now therefore, I, Stephen K. Friel, Mayor of the City of Casper, Wyoming, do hereby proclaim August 2020 as Gastroparesis Awareness Month in the City of Casper, and I call this observance to the attention to all of our citizens. In witness whereof, I hereunto set my hand and cause the official seal of the City of Casper, Wyoming, to be affixed this 18th day of August 2020. Then I'm going to give this to Leisure Services. So, Tim, if you can come up here. Mic check. So I was given this plaque by Councilman Hopkins, correct? And this is, with our greatest appreciation, we hereby present the City of Casper Leisure Services with this award in recognition of their ongoing commitment and 50 years of dedicated service to the Casper Air Modelers Association, July 25th of 2020. So there's a plaque for you to take back to your office. So 50 years, that's a long time. Okay, now is the time that we would invite anyone in the audience who wishes to speak with the council to come forward. As stated on the first page of the agenda, we ask the following. Please state your name and address, direct all questions, comments to the mayor and only the mayor. No personal attacks on staff or council will be tolerated. Council will not respond to personnel matters. These will be referred to our city manager. Questions posed by speakers may or may not be responded to by council members. Presentations will be limited to 5 minutes, and duplications of speakers will not be allowed, nor will time extensions be permitted. So prior to starting this section tonight, it looks as though we will be potentially tabling the animal ordinance tonight for further discussion instead of making a decision on third reading tonight. If you want to come up and talk about that issue in particular, this would be the time to do it. What I am asking is, over the last week, every council member up here has been inundated by, I would say, I don't even want to put a number to it. It's a lot of emails that are a form letter that everybody's been putting their name at the top of, and it says the same thing. So what I'm asking is, if when you come down here tonight, please tell us what you have to say. But if somebody else has already said it, I don't need 100 people up here telling me the exact same thing. So please come down and speak what you want to speak. At 5 minutes exactly, I'm going to cut people off. So you have 5 minutes, and I'm going to strictly adhere to that tonight. I'm not saying that we don't want to listen to what you have to say, because we absolutely do. We want to hear what you have to say. And I'd really like to see people come down here and don't tell us that what we're doing is right or wrong. If you have some suggestions on how to do it right, then please. That's the input that we need. But again, if somebody said it, please don't come down here and repeat it over and over again, okay? So with that in mind, if somebody wants to address council, go ahead.
Good evening, council. My name is Preston Pilot. I'm the owner of Four Paws Boarding and former executive director of the Pet Ring Foundation, and now defunct nonprofit. I am not going to read my super lengthy speech because you guys, like you said, Mr. Friel, that you've already heard everything. What I am going to say is 2 years ago, I came before this council because we had some issues with zoning with my charity gaming. I had a spay and neuter clinic in this community. I put one on for 5 years, 3 years, 5 years with 2 of my cohorts who left this room. We were making a massive impact in this community. I was begging for help from the city. I was begging for help from the community to keep that thing going, and nobody was coming forward with any kind of money or monetary thing. In fact, no offense, but I really felt brushed aside by the city council because my issue with zoning was basically swept to the side, and it wasn't until I came back to the next meeting that was like, hey, what about this guy over here? That then it was put back in. However, we got so far behind that we lost all of our funding. Our clinic went bust. I'm not trying to attack personal employees, but the entire Metro organization who's saying spay and neutering doesn't work, those people never stepped 1 foot in our spay and neuter clinic. They have no idea the amount of impact that we made. If Kristen Lutz is spaying and neutering her cats and y'all over here are feeding your cats, your 5 become 10, your 10 become 24, your 24 become 72, 500. And I mean, they multiply like crazy. So if Kristen is the only one that was coming to our spay and neutering clinic, it's not going to make an impact. The cats go up to Metro, they're euthanized in 72 hours if they're not claimed. So starving them is not going to work because trapping them and taking them to Metro and euthanizing them is not working. You're doing the same thing, only now you're going to do it slower. So as somebody who ran a spay and neuter clinic, knows the facts, knows what they do, I'm willing to come and talk to you guys. I just learned about this issue 3 days ago. I would have came and told you what we as a community need, what it's going to take to get the spay and neuter clinic working and functioning, because I funded the thing myself for 5 years with my cohorts, but for 3 years I did it on my own, funding-wise. So I know what it takes to work and make in this community, and you can make a giant impact with spay and neutering, but it takes funds, it takes money. And I retired from rescue because I could no longer do it anymore. It was extremely frustrating and I wasn't getting any help from anybody. So I jumped into the boarding business. I still deal with dogs, but I don't deal with any of that stuff. So I would be happy to lend an ear, sit in on your meetings, give you advice, tell you what works. Bob, you asked about vaccinating. All of our spay and neuter clinics, when we spay and neuter our feral cats, we clip their ear, we vaccinated them for rabies, we vaccinated them for distemper parvo. We paid for that. It never came from the community. Our charity gaming paid for that. But that was to reduce the influx of leukemia and all the other things that cats spread, because it's a dirty thing. I can take you in any neighborhood in this town and show you where the feral cats are exploding. The people that are calling you saying, these cats are everywhere in my yard, I can tell you where those are at because we targeted those areas. We were trying to make an impact, but I'm one guy with 2 other team members who were trying to do it, and we weren't successful because we ran out of money. So that's all I'm going to say. I won't continue to babble on, but I would love to sit in on any meeting and give you all some advice and tell you what works and what doesn't work. And yeah, it will work if you get the people involved. So.
Okay, any questions for Preston? Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Sweeney?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Pat Sweeney, 951 North Kimball. And 2 items, not feral cats, massage therapy. I just would ask, I realize it's just up to move forward with the public hearing, but my interest is this. I was contacted, I'm going to guess 3 years ago, by Leah Juarez in trying to do something. I'm on the Labor Health Committee with the state legislature and trying to move something forward on a state level on licensing, not only set some standards and work that way. And I told her it will take us years. You know, the state legislature does not move forward very quickly, especially on licensing. So I applaud the efforts that the city's putting forward, and definitely appreciate trying to do something with, we all know names of places that have been busted years ago with the illegal trafficking, but that's not what we're talking about here. So all I ask is if they have suggestions that council and staff listen to those suggestions so that we don't go too far. And regulate credible businesses out of business, which often happens with the state legislature and again, takes time. The other issue that I noticed, I've been asleep at the wheel, is on the National Electrical Code that's in its second reading. And I'd like to ask if the International Fire Code has already been heard, or if that's coming up as far as updating. And then the only comment I've got about the electrical code is a few years ago there was an update to the codes that recently became aware on a rental I have that there's these pre-done breakers that the new international code requires in the breaker box for a GFI. And so you don't have your normal GFIs, my understanding is, around your sink and places. Well, those new style breakers are garbage. They'll fry themselves. And in a couple of years, probably 4 years it's been. And now I'm having to go through replacing those. And my opinion is, why are we doing that? Just because the International Building Code says that, I'm surprised a bunch of electricians haven't, and companies haven't come forward to council and said, hey, there's a problem with this stuff. So that's my only comment on that. And to the international fire codes, when those are updated again, I just would advise you to please look at the residential situation. You know, this is different than food trucks, and I think we've gone too far with the international codes on the food trucks, because I have a hot dog cart and the health department told me I got to put a hood. It's an open air. So I'll just take it to Denver and sell it down there. This, you know, the international code, we're going to stop development and really slow development down if we require residences to have sprinkler systems on the interior for fire suppression. And I would hate to see that, to put that on the back of the developers and the folks. So, appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Anything for Mr. Sweeney? All right. Now, Councilman Bates.
Not so much for you, Mr. Sweeney, but he asked about the fire codes, and I can't remember if he was asking if we've already passed that recently or if that's coming up. Can we answer that for him, please?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Bates, we do not have anything of that nature on the horizon. And certainly I would agree if that were an element of what we would propose, my recommendation would be a local amendment to take out the residential requirements. We have not pushed for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Kelly.
I'm assuming you're talking about the yellow breakers, which are the ground fault breakers. They've got a little yellow tab on the one end.
I haven't noticed that on, Your Honor. I haven't noticed the yellow tab.
Well,
they all appear white in the.
Do what?
They appear white in the breaker box.
If they're white, they're arc fault. That's what I was getting at, is basically you've got the black, which are old kind. You've got the yellow, which are GFI. You have white, which are arc fault. And then you have purple, which are a combination arc fault GFI. And I have asked to have some information about the combination, because, yeah, I've had complaints about that. As a matter of fact, I've got issues with my purple ones as well. But we are looking into that, so,
Thank you, Your Honor.
yeah. I want to let you know that, yeah.
Appreciate. I'm a dishwasher by trade.
Well, I found all of this out when I added on, so.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Leah Juarez, Mills resident. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm here to speak on the massage regulation. However, I won't read my entire statement today. I just want to make it known that I want to be involved in the process as a spa owner. And I want to be pretty clear in the fact that from what I've read in the papers, we're pursuing this licensing because we want to prohibit illegal activity. And I just want to be clear that that won't happen. That won't stop illegal activity. And I know that because I'm in the cosmetology industry, which requires licensing, and I'm also a tattoo artist, which also requires licensing. And we are well aware of individuals who perform both in Casper, Mills, and Natrona County without a license. And so creating the ordinance won't stop illegal behavior. And the Attorney General in Cheyenne will confirm that for you as well. But I won't, because we have a lot to do tonight, and some of us have somewhere to be at 7 when the polls close. But I just wanted to be known that I'm here, and I just want to make sure that we don't create an ordinance just for the sake of creating an ordinance, to make sure that it's going to do what we say it's going to do. And I firmly believe that licensing based on education should be at the city level. However, I am in support of health inspections for the massage industry, but not licensing on education. Thank you.
Any questions for Ms. Juarez? Okay, thank you.
Before I start to talk about the tethering, I'm really confused as to what the law is now. I know you guys went, back and forth, but what is the law right now?
2 hours right now.
2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And that will not change until we have a third reading and then 21 days after.
Right, but I can still speak on tethering.
You can.
Okay. My name is Kat Young, and I'm at P.O. Box 361, Casper. I'm just going to say that I'm really against tethering at all. If you own a dog, and you said if you have a barbecue and you tether your dog, that's fine. If somebody is tethering their dog, they shouldn't have a dog, is what I think. I'm not a dog owner. I'm a dog lover. I don't think you own your dog. If you have a dog, it should be a family member. I live with my 95-year-old dad. I take care of him. And he's got a 14-year-old Westie that he absolutely loves. And I don't know why I'm getting so choked up, but I just think, I think if you give them 10 hours, they're gonna do 24 hours. I've seen dogs that are tethered all day and all night. I go out walking all over town, and I see some pretty cruel things. Dogs that don't have any food or water, that are tethered, that don't have a place to go into to get out of the sun or the snow. And that's what I wanted to say. I mean, I've never said I'm a dog owner, I'm a dog lover. And I am so against tethering for 10 hours. Because again, I think 10 is going to turn into 20 and 24. So if you would just consider what I'm saying, I think it's cruel and inhumane. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Marion Kingdon. I live at 1630 South Oak Street. There's probably at least 24 dogs on my 2-block area. And I think that our owners of the dogs there are pretty responsible. I haven't heard, any problems. But I did, a few years ago, see a dog jump over a fence who had been tethered. And was hanging himself. I heard that noise and I ran across the street, and it was a pit bull, a very beautiful dog. I was afraid to go and try to help the poor thing. So I called first police department, then Metro, and they came. In the meantime, the owner did realize, I guess, that his dog had jumped the fence and cut the rope so that it didn't hang itself. But this is what happens a lot of times with tethered animals. They get tangled up, they jump something, they tip over their water dishes, their food, and things like that, and they just starve themselves, or they're, become emaciated. Anyway, I'm against the tethering. The 2-hour tethering I didn't think was so bad because there's people at work and sometimes have to be away, and things happen. But a 24-hour tethering or even a 12-hour tethering is just too long. Too many things can happen. People take advantage of that. The animals suffer because of heat and the cold. I just think that there shouldn't be an ordinance that would say that they can tether for that long a time. I think that it's better not to have an ordinance than to have one like that. The ordinance that's on the books would be better to have for people that, find it necessary for a few hours to tether their animal in case of emergency or at work or whatever has to be done. But responsible owners would make sure that their dogs are taken care of. I help my neighbor. I let their dogs out. People can find ways to take care of their animals. And that's what I want to say. It's just, I'm against the ordinance.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Any questions?
Thank
Thank you, ma'am.
Mayor, Council,
Good evening.
we've come before you for the first 2 readings of these very important issues, and we come before you again to plead with you to do what is in the best interest of the animals and our community. We have shared with you strong data, statistics, research done for decades by reputable organizations who are experts in their field. The United States Humane Society, Canine Unchained, Alley Cat Allies, the Department of Agriculture, etc. The list goes on and on. We in turn have asked for the hard data and statistics, not just opinions, as to why the city of Casper believes this is the best course of action, and have not been able to obtain that information. Aren't we, the citizens of Casper, entitled to have information backed up by data? Informed and educated decisions are important for our city officials to make. The 2 main questions I have asked are, where is the data to support these revisions? And I'm talking about the tethering. Going backwards to 10 hours, and how is it going to be enforced? And I can't seem to get answers to those questions. I adopted my dog from Metro 10 years ago. She was dragging a chain when she was picked up by Metro. She had obviously been abused. She was terrified of men, belts, and flashlights. She has never again been on the end of a tether, with the exception of attended tethering, briefly while I work in the front yard, just so that she can be with me and cannot run out in the street or approach people walking by. She is family. I would no more put her on a chain and leave her unattended than I would one of my children or my grandchildren. There seems to be a concern that if we go forward with a no unattended tethering ordinance, that we may be punishing people who don't have the means to have a fence, a dog run, a doggy door, etc. My answer to that is a pet is not a right or a necessity. A pet is a privilege and a luxury. If you don't have the means to properly take care of a pet, then you need to rethink your decision. Is it okay to punish the animal instead? There are other options to consider. For example, a person whose fence is blown down and it will take time to fix it, give them a fix-it ticket or whatever verbiage you want to use. There are also resources out there to help people to take care of their animals. Again, education is the key. American Humane says 25% of dog attacks involve chained dogs. Chained dogs are 2.8 times more likely to bite. Chaining increases their stress, protectiveness, and vulnerability, in turn increasing their potential for aggressiveness, making it unsafe for our community. Chained dogs kill as many children as do firearms, and more than falls from trees, from playground equipment, and firework accidents combined. American Veterinary Medical Association says never tether. The CDC says tethered animals are more likely to bite. The HSUS says it is inhumane. The Department of Agriculture in 1997 in Washington, D.C. changed their regulations to read, "We are amending the regulations for the humane treatment of dogs under the Animal Welfare Act by removing the provisions for tethering dogs as a means of primary enclosure. Our experience is enforcing the Animal Welfare Act has led us to conclude that permanently tethering a dog as a means of primary enclosure is not a humane practice that is in the animal's best interest." I cannot in good faith support the revisions or amendments. They are not in the best interest of the animals or the community. The best case scenario is to adopt a no unattended tethering ordinance. It is the easiest to enforce and would save the city money and manpower, giving their APOs time for other issues. I'm going to read something that I sent to all the council. We pulled this off of City of Casper website. Someone from Metro posted it on the Metro page. So apparently someone at Metro feels very strongly about tethering, and I think it's important that the city hear this. Bear with me because it's...
1 minute.
Okay. It's hard for me to get through this, so I ask for your patience. The second week of February is National Unchain Your Dog Week. Metro Animal Services strongly advocates for the incorporation of dogs into families. Consider this a day in the life of a chained dog. Just one of many of thousands of dogs that know this life in this country. 6:30 a.m. I saw and I heard people moving around in the house, but no one came outside to check on me. They were talking and laughing. I wish I could be with them. 7 a.m. I'm hungry and thirsty. I tipped over my food and water bowls last night when I got tangled in my chain. I'm still tangled in my chain. 8:15 a.m. The people who live in the house are all leaving. I tried to run toward them with my tail wagging, hoping they will notice me. But my chain snapped me backward and I fell to the ground. My chain is still tangled and I hurt my leg. 8:15 to 2 p.m. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do with myself. I can't protect the house from my chain. I don't have any toys to play with and there are no other dogs to keep me company. Maybe if I bark, someone will come and visit me. I decided to bark all day. 2:30 p.m., an animal control officer arrives and posts a notice on the door of the house. He looks pityingly at me. Do I look bad? I know I'm dirty, but it's hard to stay clean when I'm always sitting in dirt. I paced in circles and growled at him because I didn't know what else to do. 3:15 p.m., the smallest person from the house has returned. Maybe he will play with me. He didn't, maybe because I have to go to the bathroom in the same place, right by my shelter, and it smells really bad.
I'm going to have to ask you to wrap it up.
Okay. This was posted by Metro. Dogs are naturally social and they thrive in interaction with people or other animals. Dogs are incredibly loyal and can make great companions if they're given the chance. Chained up outside, they can become very confused, unsocial, and pose a serious danger to passersby, especially children. So if you decide to bring a dog into your family, incorporate him into the family pack and he'll be a much better dog. Be kind to dogs and bring them in. They deserve it. I hope all of you will read this since I didn't get to finish it because it's very powerful and it's very important that you know what it says. Metro posted it, so they must feel this way. I'm just asking you to, I'm hearing that you're possibly going to table this, and I think that's a great idea so that we can work together to do something better for the community.
Okay. Any questions? Councilman Kathy.
What was the date that was posted?
There is no date on it.
That was posted 7 years ago,
Okay, doesn't matter.
but it was posted as a promo
Okay.
for that particular day. And that's the only time that's been posted.
Okay.
So I thought it interesting that you would go back to it for 7 years.
It just was on there. We happened upon it, and we pulled it off, and I didn't know it was 7 years ago, but it doesn't matter, 7 years ago or today.
No.
A chained dog is going to suffer.
Councilman Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Terrell, have you read the proposed amendments to the ordinance for this evening on tethering? I'm over here.
I can't tell who's talking
That's
to me.
all right.
because of the
That's
mouse.
okay. That's okay.
I'm sorry, now what?
Have you read the proposed amendments that talk about non-spill containers and et cetera, et cetera? I just want to
Let's talk about what, I'm sorry?
non-spill containers, et cetera. You're familiar with those.
I am.
those don't address any of your concerns.
They do, as long as they're enforced. The problem is enforcement, and I'm not getting any answers to those questions, because I've seen it happen, and that's always been, to my knowledge, part of the ordinances, or at least the ones we proposed, and they're not enforced. So that's the problem.
Just a follow-up question, and I'm really just trying to learn about all of this.
Sure,
Because
I appreciate that.
Obviously, people have very strongly held opinions. Councilman Cathy was a couple meetings ago doing some calculations on the range that dogs would have within a dog run versus if they are tethered and have access to shelter. Do you have any opinions on how small an enclosure would be where it would cross the line into being abusive?
There are statistics for that, and I, off the top of my head, they need to have a certain amount of feet to be able to go into a run, to get exercise, that sort of thing. I would have to get more information for you on that, because there are specific statistics as to how big a dog run should be. And again, it's going to depend like on the length of the ropes and so forth, the size of the dog.
Do you think it would be abusive for an animal to just be kept in a dog container inside for the entire day?
Yes. For the entire day, yes.
Because we don't have anything in the ordinance that talks about that.
You're right. You're right.
Would you rather, I'm just curious, I don't mean to push the envelope on this.
No,
but
that's okay.
what would you prefer? Would you prefer an animal to be in a enclosed container where they can't move?
No.
Or an animal to be tethered and have access to shelter?
You know, that's a tough one, because either way, in my opinion, it's inhumane.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councilman Pacheco.
I don't have a question or anything. I appreciate you guys coming up here. I own dogs, and I understand that I think people tend to don't understand what dogs mean, or animals or pets mean to people. I have staff members that don't have children, and they live by themselves, and animals mean a lot to them. So I appreciate you coming up here, sharing that story. 7 years, whatever, it doesn't really matter. I understand the level of how some people feel about their pets. And so I appreciate it. It's very scary to have to come up here and express your opinion. But that's what we're about in our community. We have the opportunity to express where we're at, you know, and the things that we believe in and our passions. And so it's very hard to come up here and look at all of us and do that. So, you know, we're tabling it because we want to make this right.
Thank you.
We don't want to make a mistake. The vice mayor said we don't want to have to come back again. We want to do this, and so we're getting there. So your activism is being heard, and so thank you so much.
Thank you. And I do appreciate everything that you're doing. I do. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, council members and Mr.
Good evening.
Kathy Reynolds, and I live at 2633 South Kaufman. And I'm rising this evening to ask you to table this ordinance. And I would like to be a part of a citizens committee to try to help you make this a little bit better. I have a friend, my friend and I have been exercising TNR in Casper for several years now. So we have a lot of experience with it and have made a lot of mistakes. And we not only spay and neuter the animals, we also vaccinate them. We also have their ears tipped so that we can identify them. So we have some knowledge. As you can tell by the community response, and I apologize that we're a little bit late here, it's third reading, but this is a very tender subject, but it's also a very complex one. And so there's a lot of expertise out here. But first, I'd like to thank you for having brought it up, because I, an individual, my friend, and many other individuals are out here working on this, and groups. We are not asking for any help or any money. We're doing it at our own expense to take care of these animals because we see that there is a need to take care of it. I do think that if you would have the patience to table this and give us the opportunity, number one, to get organized. I've made a list of all the folks who attended this evening who are interested in it, who would like to help or need help. to try to get this under a little bit better control. There are much better answers to this than the idea of starving the animals. That does not work. I can tell you it does not work. I do know some things that do work, and we're happy to work with you on that. But I do thank you very much for bringing it up, because as you can see, a lot of people didn't know about it. A lot of people are very concerned about it. It's a hot topic, and we will be able to get organized now that we have not been in the past, and we're happy to help the city. We have been helping, but we're happy to make a more concerted effort. The other thing I would like to say is that there is national funding. There's gifts and grants and donations. We could do a GoFundMe page. We're not asking you for any money. We're asking you for cooperation, and particularly with Metro, and for a little bit of organization. And like I said, we'll come in and help you with this to get this right. I agree with you. It should be tabled until you have the wording right and have experts on board that can help you with this. I'm not an expert, but I do have some experience, and I do know people who are. I guess I would like to thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to be heard today. And if there's any thing that I can do to help out or answer any questions, I'd be happy to do that. We have rehomed a lot of kittens, and individuals found homes for individuals that were friendly enough to be pets. Some of the animals are left where they are because that's basically where they belong. I've worked with property owners and been greatly appreciated, because the key is you feed them, but you don't feed them so much that they become dependent on that. They also catch rodents or whatever that the property owner relies on them to do. So anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions? Vice Mayor Lutz.
This question just occurred to me when you were talking. When you are re-releasing the cats into the community, do you consult with the neighborhoods? The only reason I ask that, I mean, obviously, I know that you're just releasing them probably where you found them. The reason I ask that, I mean, I notice, whatever they're called, neighborhood feral community cats near my home, but I have my own pets that these feral cats have a tendency to threaten, or they get in my garage and use the restroom in my garage. I also have small kids that I really don't want to get sick from being like bitten or attacked by these feral cats. And so I think when we develop this, we kind of need to talk about the fact that re-releasing them into some of these neighborhoods is probably against the residents' wishes. And so, I mean, I just think that when we're developing this and discussing that, we probably need to bring that into the discussion.
I agree. It depends on the situation, of course. In my case, I've been working with property owners, so it isn't a situation. And I talked to them about it. Okay, first of all, how many individuals can the colony support, and how many are you interested in having? And then we'll find the homes, but mostly we're going to keep them from propagating. That's the most important thing. If you pull out all the animals out of a colony, it will re-inhabit. They will come back in almost immediately. I have done that, and I ended up within 3 months, it completely refilled. So I had to start over, basically. What I did was remove them all to a ranch for a rancher who wanted them for barn cats. Removed the entire colony, which is called the vacuum effect, and basically it filled in with animals that were in the surrounding area, and they took it over. They're territorial. If you put them back where they are, if they're animals that that reside better outside and alone, because there are many, especially cats, they don't need people. They really don't. Now, they like people, some of them, but some of them don't. And you put them back in there, and they do just fine. But they will control themselves. Basically, the territory will only support so many. The colony area will only support so many. And they basically will take care of all of that. As far as in a neighborhood, that's another situation where you'd have to get to know the neighborhood, the individuals, the cats, and figure all that out. But that's what we do. That's basically what the organization would do. There isn't an organization right now, at least as far as I know, but there is an organization, but she definitely needs help. And that's what we're going to do, is try to help her and expand her operation and maybe help more in the city.
Okay.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor. I really appreciate that many of you folks are soft-spoken and that you're here very sincerely. I'm having difficulty hearing some of you, and if I'm having difficulty, I greatly suspicion that the people that are trying to watch on television at home or on the computer are having even more trouble. And I know that it's intimidating to come up and have somebody say, okay, here, stand in front of this group and talk. And oh, by the way, you got to get right up to the microphone, and you're sitting there, and microphones are intimidating. But actually, I really think it would be helpful if some of you wouldn't mind talking into that thing a little bit more. And I don't mean to pick on you, ma'am. You just happen to be the next one in line. Thank you.
That's okay. My name is Catherine Forsling, and I live in Casper. I live in West Shore Village. I've been doing TNR for 45 years now on my own. We don't look for any help financially from anyone. I agree you do need to check with the neighborhoods. What I've been doing is I find a barn home that's a good, safe home, and then we trap them and get their rabies shots and get them fixed and send them out to the barn home. Unfortunately, there's not that many barn homes available. Traditional TNR does where there's a designated feeder and they get them fixed in the rabies shots, and then the population is stable. So there's not a lot of the nuisance problems, there's not a lot of kittens, there's not a lot of howling and yowling and mating behaviors and spraying and things like that. I'm not saying it's completely goes away, and without the cats, there'd be a lot of vermin. As far as this ban on feeding the cats, you're gonna make half of Casper criminals because it's against people's compassion to just let them starve, and most of them are used to being fed. And also what will happen, people hate the cats because they kill birds. If they have no feeding, they'll kill the birds, the rabbits, the squirrels. They'll get into the trash, they'll get into people's dog food, they'll be starving. So I don't see, people are still gonna trap them and send them to Metro. I don't see how starving them is gonna solve that problem. And I would be more than happy to contribute if anyone needs any kind of advice, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening. My
Good
name
evening.
is Laura Ariano Brio. I live at 4517 East 18th Street in Casper, Wyoming. I'm sorry, I can't leave this thing on. There's so many points that have been brought up. I don't want to repeat everything, so I'm just going to kind of make some clear points here. Nobody's mentioned that a feeding ban kind of endorses cruelty and pits neighbor against neighbor, and I think that's going to be bad for this community. I believe that other than responsible pet ownership, TNR is the way to go, and I know there's arguments even against that. But I want to reiterate that it includes vaccination, if you're not aware of that. I do have personal experience doing TNR and can tell you it works. It's amazing. Feeding bans will hinder the work that's being done out here. I only found out recently about these proposals, probably around the second reading. In less than 2 weeks, I've spoken to nearly 50 people around the community and found that they were unaware and they oppose a feeding ban. Almost everyone I spoke with had a story to share about it, a cat or kitten they've adopted, even dog tethering stories. So I was astounded by how much this community loves animals. And I'm just amazed how everybody's kind of crawled out of the woodwork so quickly, just learning about it. I would like to say that TNR education is equally important for the council as it is the community. I'd ask the council please table this to allow more time for a meeting to take place where all of your questions could be addressed, any assumptions clarified, and to provide an adequate opportunity for Casper residents to come forward so this council can make a more informed decision. Something I would like to be involved with is a meeting as part of the community. I would also like to add that it is important to list TNR as trap, neuter, return rather than release in any ordinance language because cats are very territorial. If released into a colony other than where they came from or a territory that's unfamiliar, TNR, the efforts could be lost that way. Situations such as what you mentioned, those need to be dealt with, per situation. Again, it just falls back to education. TNR needs to be done properly, and to be effective, it's always much better to learn by the mistakes of others and your own, especially when you're dealing with an animal's life and well-being. One positive from this proposal, it's bringing people together. We're starting to talk about it. I didn't even know there were others in the community doing this. And I think that where there's a will, there's a way. We can do this. And in closing, just know that I have the utmost respect for all of you, Mayor and Council. I thank you for what you do. And I hope that you will not only hear through your ears today, but also listen through your hearts and minds to what's being said to make the best decision for this community, which includes these animals. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Heidi Lampman. I live at 265 North 3rd, and I'm here to speak on the feed ban. I understand you guys are tabling it, and I think that's wonderful. There's nothing worse than just throwing some words together and then making it the law. But I do want to address some things. Some people have made some great points that I stand behind 100%. One thing I definitely want to stress is starving them is not the answer. Some of these cats were born into colonies where that's all they know. They know being fed. So if they're not getting that, they're going to come harass you. You want to be harassed. Don't don't let your neighbor feed them anymore. I do think we need to control them, and TNR is how we control that. Laura spoke that you can get kittens and put them in homes. So now they're not out in the community being a feral cat. They now can be in a home. And if we starve them, they're not going to have that chance, but they're going to become more of a problem. They're going to get in garbage bins. They're going to eat the birds regardless. But that's the thing too, is people have a misconception that if you feed a cat, it's not going to catch a mouse. And that's not the case. I feed my cat every day, and she'll catch a mouse regardless of if she has food or not. So I just ask that when you guys do talk about this again, get the community involved. I've run a rescue for 13 years. Jamie with Temporary Home does the TNR. We're not pros at it by any means. We could use tons of help. But I ask that you guys think about it in a compassionate way, not just they're peeing in my garage, I don't want my kids injured. Because if we eradicate these cats, you're going to get rid of cats, but you're going to have mice peeing in your garage and bringing disease onto your children. I know having 50 next door isn't great, so I ask that you look into TNR. We can have 20 instead of 50 because we're trap, neuter, releasing. They're getting fixed. They're getting vaccinated, so you don't have to worry about that. And if the city wants them microchipped so that they can be tracked, great. We can microchip them while they're under. So like I said, I don't want to reiterate what everyone else has said, but I do want you guys to think compassionately about this. It's not just a simple, don't put food out. I mean, why would we want to make it a law to be compassionate? Is that the city we want to be? So I just want you guys to think about that when you table this, and think about getting the community involved. Get a hold of some rescue, because I just found out about this a week ago. So that's all I have to say for you guys tonight, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council. Zach Hutchinson, 2015 South Oak Crest, Casper. I'm the Community Science Coordinator for Audubon Rockies, the regional office of the National Audubon Society. I was here at the second reading. I spoke in favor of the ban on feeding, and I think tabling it is definitely not a bad idea at this point. Obviously, you're getting a lot of people contacting you, your constituents, and I understand that that's critical to hear them out. The one thing I will say is on this TNR program, the one thing that it does not magically do is it does not take cats out of the community. So even if you trap, neuter, release, return, whatever verbiage is being used, if they trap 50 cats, those 50 cats go right back to where they were. Now, yes, in the future, those cats cannot reproduce. It does not stop more abandonments. It also can't stop cats that aren't trapped. When I originally heard about this months ago, I thought the goal was to prevent the gathering of feral cats. If the feeding still happens, even after TNR, those cats still gather. It doesn't prevent the gathering and then the property damage and other issues that come from it. And yes, long-term, maybe it could reduce a small percentage of the population, but again, it doesn't address abandonment and missed cats. And so I don't see why you could you could ban the feeding and also still encourage and partner with them on this program. They could go hand in hand, especially where taxpayers, citizens, their funds are not going into it. If they can find the funding, although we've heard from a rescue tonight that tried it for 5 years and then they ran out of funding. Is that going to happen with this program? What's the long-term viability financially of a program like this? Who's going to be in charge of that money? Is there going to be a centralized nonprofit that oversees that? You know, a lot of questions there. There were two things that popped up after I spoke last time that council members brought up, and I wanted to address that. There was the question about, you know, feeding wild birds and affecting their migration patterns, and I won't dispute that. That absolutely happens. And then there was also the question of, well, if they're wild animals, why do we need to feed them? And that's a question that I think actually deserves some more discussion when you have your other sessions, is, are these wild animals or are they domestic animals? If they're domestic animals, they are at large, and currently that means if they're at large, they need to be trapped and taken away. If they're wild animals, the state has them listed in a certain way to be managed as wild animals. That's not a solution that I think anyone behind me wants, and I don't necessarily want that either. I'm not encouraging the criminalization of empathy for animals. Absolutely not doing that. I don't want to criminalize empathy for animals. People feeding animals because they have empathy for them, compassion for them. No one wants to criminalize that. I am assuming council does not want to criminalize that. What we want to do is to prevent property damage. We want to prevent potential for disease spread. We want to prevent issues with neighbors. Those are things we want to prevent, and the feeding ban will help that, and partnering with these organizations will also then help long-term preventing that. But again, it doesn't magically take 50 cats that were caught and remove them from the population. They have long lives. They could be still in that area for a very long time. There was the term vacuum effect brought up, and the vacuum effect study was...
1 minute, sir.
Thank you. Was heavily flawed. The problem with the idea behind the vacuum effect where you take cats away, new cats move in, well, those cats came from somewhere. So even if they're moving in from somewhere else, well, then that's a new space created. The vacuum effect doesn't hold up. That study had severe flaws behind it. So when you hear things like that, the TNR program, all it does is prevent the cats that are captured from reproducing and having poor quality of life because of disease. But it does not fix the issue of gathering cats and the problems that are associated with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Councilman Bates.
Not so much a question, but a comment that you said with the TNR, you said, you know, who's going to finance it, who's going to fund it, how is it going to continue going? Well, if you were listening to the people, they got a huge support of people that is standing up saying, I will. So to answer your question, every person has come up and spoke on TNR. Okay. They will. And so that's not a concern that I have. That's not a concern anybody should have. If they can afford it, great. If they can't, you know what? Some of them will step up and try. So as far as that, you're really on the feeding ban. And maybe I'd have to go back and listen, and I apologize. But if you don't mind real quickly, why are you so for the feeding ban, if you don't mind asking? I'm sure you covered it last time, and I apologize, I don't remember.
So against for the proposal for the feeding ban, from a wildlife standpoint, I'm here on behalf of wildlife. I have not addressed that because for council, that is not maybe a priority, right? Is how do we protect wildlife? I'm here because feral cats kill over 3 billion native birds a year. That's why I'm here. And TNR does not prevent that. TNR cannot stop that. But I'm not talking about that with council because that's not council's concern. I'm bringing other issues that I think are more concerning for the people of Casper. The wildlife of Casper should be protected by the people who've been put in charge of that, which involves groups like Game and Fish, right? Other regulatory agencies that are in charge of protecting the wildlife of Wyoming. So that's why I have not spoken about it to this point, but that is why I am here, is because feral cats kill native wildlife, and in large numbers.
Okay, thank you, sir. Is there anyone else who would like to address council? Okay, we'll move on. Establish dates of public hearings. Please read the consent agenda titles.
Establishing September 1st, 2020 as the public hearing date for consideration of the following two items. Item 8A1, local limits for the industrial pretreatment program, and item 8A2, massage therapy license and permit ordinance.
Chair would entertain a motion by minute action, establish the public hearing dates just read.
So moved.
Moved by Councilman Hopkins, second by Councilman Cathy. Any abstention or nay votes? All voting aye.
Aye.
Please record the vote.
All members voting aye, motion passed.
Please read the ordinance on third reading by title only.
An ordinance updating and amending Chapter 6.04 of the Casper Municipal Code, Animal Care and Control.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Huber.
as I think all of you know, I am really loath to table things. I always think that it's better to just move forward on them. It's my understanding that there are several amendments that are going to be proposed tonight by various members of the council. And it's my further understanding that that many of those amendments would really fundamentally and absolutely change the nature of the amendment that we had passed on first and second reading, and that is now here on third reading. And that being the case, where there's now going to be a variety of amendments to this proposal that would so dramatically change the character of what's in front of the council, I feel very uncomfortable and don't want to proceed forward on that tonight on third reading. I think we should table this, put it back to a work session. I would like to work on it next week at the work session, bring it back at a date certain, and try to get this going. Therefore, for those reasons, I would move that we table this to a date certain and work on this a little bit more.
Councilman Huber is moving to table this item and take it to our next work session. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Vice Mayor Lutz. Any discussion? Okay. Any abstention or nay votes?
Nay.
Councilman Cathy is nay. Okay, all voting aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Do we need to set a date of certain?
Mr. City Manager or Mr. City Attorney.
Thank you very much. Mayor, Council, I think it's better to have a date certain set since we're postponing to a date certain. And the work session is not really for the purpose of moving the ordinance forward. So if you could set, I don't know, September the 1st or 14th or whatever.
And my feeling would be the date certain would be, in essence, 2 weeks from today, so that we can move forward on this. Otherwise, I'm just afraid it's just gonna drag on and on. I want to keep going.
Okay, so we have a first and a second to a date certain of tabling this to September 1st, put it into our work session for next week. And, okay, so with the aye noted, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Please record the vote.
With Councilman Kathy voting nay, motion to table this to September 1st passed.
Okay. Please read the ordinance on second reading by title only.
An ordinance amending Chapter 15.28 of the Casper Municipal Code and adopting the 2020 NFPA 70 National Electrical Code.
Chair would entertain a motion to approve on second reading the ordinance just read.
So moved.
Moved by Councilman Hopkins,
Second.
second by Councilman Johnson. Council will now listen to public comments. Public comments are limited to 5 minutes. No duplication of speakers will be allowed. Okay, it doesn't look like we have any comments. Any discussion? Councilman Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to maybe expand a little bit, if I remember correctly, this is not the International Electrical Code, and I think it's been referred to by some people as the International Electrical Code. This is the National Electrical Code, and it is already the law of the land in the state of Wyoming. All we're really doing is bringing the updated version of the code to put in our statutes. So that's just a little side.
Councilman Kathy.
Well, as was mentioned earlier by city manager, we can exempt things from the codes. And you heard my concern on first reading about certain ones of the breakers. You heard Mr. Sweeney's discussion tonight about some of these new breakers. And it appears that there might be some problems with those. So I still think, because Mr. Ellison has been communicating with me, but basically he's been telling me that there are bunches of them out there and that where I can get them, but that is not addressing the problems that Mr. Sweeney was referring to or that I was referring to. So I believe there are still some issues with these new ground fault, arc fault circuit breakers. Because if you have certain vacuums, certain electric motors, they will trip the arc fault breakers if you just have slightly worn brushes in them. Ladies have had problems ever since these come about with their vacuum cleaners screwing with the breakers. So.
Vice Mayor Lutz.
Just a question, because maybe this is obvious and just not to me. So if the state's already adopted this, can we make like little tweaks and adjustments? And then, so basically it's still the law of the land at the state level, it's just not at the city of Casper level?
Mr. City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, Madam Vice Mayor, local amendment authority is still retained by the local jurisdiction. And so if it pleases the council, we'd be happy to work on an amendment to bring forward in work session next week that might go further toward addressing the issue that Councilman Kathy has identified and we've heard from Representative Sweeney, and give it a shot and see what you think.
See what Mr. Ellison thinks as well, because I was on council when this was originally passed, and we were told at that time, even though we had been hearing some of these same things, that, oh no, they've solved all the problems. Well, I only added on my garage a couple of years ago. I've still got the same problems. So, and it may be that it's just when you're trying to retrofit houses, as opposed to building one from scratch. But there are some issues out there, and they're paying for housewives and people trying to work.
Mr. Mayor, so would council like us to take a shot at that and see what we can bring forward?
Council good with that? Councilman Huber.
Mr. Mayor, I know that with some of these things there are problems. Councilman Kathy is a much better engineer than I am and much more knowledgeable about electrical matters than I'm sure I am. But the problem that I see is that if this code has been enacted by the state and is out there, how are we going to paddle upstream against that current? And we can try as hard as we want to and paddle like hell against that kind of a current. I don't think we're going to get anywhere, and I am very reluctant to substitute anecdotal, supposed technical knowledge about these things and say, well, we're not going to adopt this code, which is past muster everywhere else, but we're not going to adopt it because we don't think that it's right for Casper. And if we do, well, and so somebody goes up to, Codale Electric or wherever and says, well, or out to Menards and says, well, I want one of these breakers that's not one of those kind. And if they can't get them because they don't have them, because everywhere else in the world requires this other kind, we're just paddling up against a current that we're not going to get anywhere. And so, while I have a great deal of respect for what Councilman Cathy's saying and what Mr. Sweeney's saying, I'm just reluctant to try to paddle against that current, and I think we should just move forward with this.
City Manager, I guess the question that I would bring up is that when these new electrical codes come out, the question of Mr. Elston is do these apply to new construction or is it existing homes? Because I could see that, you have a home that's 30, 40 years old and then you're trying to retro some of these things in, like GFI breakers into a panel as opposed to a regular GFI in a wall that's worked forever. Could there become problems with that? But I agree with what you're saying is that we can't just sit here and you can't just pick it apart and try and redo the entire electrical code because, you're fighting a non-winning battle. But I think more so when these are updated, are they updated to new construction standards or are these supposed to be across the board? That's a question that I would really have because you could take brand new construction today and, the Romex wiring that you have in a house today, and then you go back to a 1900s home that has knob and tube wiring and it's completely two different things. So.
Mr. Mayor, that's a great question, and I think begs the reason potentially for another question that ought to be answered when we have a work session opportunity to kind of go through these things in a little more detail. So my recommendation would be, for what it's worth, to pass on second reading, ask us to bring back some information for the work session in the interim, and if we can prepare an amendment that addresses these questions, at least to the majority of the council's view, bring it forward for third reading and see where we go.
Go ahead, and then I'll take it a step further. Go ahead.
What I was going to mention is you asked about the 1920s houses and things. Basically, the new code, if I go out and I do an addition to a house that is less than, it's 35 to 45% of value. I don't remember the exact number. But if it's less than that, all you have to do is use the new code for the new construction. If you go past that number, you have to bring the whole residence up to the current code. So that's where that falls in there. And where I'm finding is that when you're doing that less than having to bring the whole house up to code, and you're putting actually new code in with old code, is where it seems to be having some of the issues. And so that's what my concern is.
So now I'll come back and take it a step further I get what you're saying, but to go back to our discussion 2 weeks ago, I believe it was, when we talked about licensing for inspectors here in town. General inspectors are currently going out there and putting new code into place on homes. And you look at the industry I'm in with real estate, they are going into homes to do inspections. There's nothing been changed in the house at all. They're just going in to inspect the house to see if things are working, but they're applying new code to that. And so that's my question. Do these apply to homes across the board, or does it go to new construction? Because to tell somebody that's selling a 1900s home, a general inspector goes in and says, well, this is not to today's code. Well, no kidding, because it's built in 1900 and we haven't done anything to it. So it shouldn't be to code. but some of them believe that it should be. So that's why I'm asking for a clarification that when these come into place, are they in fact just for new construction, or is there a time frame that those apply to? And I think I know the answer, but I'd rather it be clarified.
Yeah. We just ran into that, so I'm all in favor of licensing inspectors, because basically, and it doesn't even have to get to electrical. Go back to the houses that are along, is it Walcott? The big houses, yeah. Look at those banisters and their balustrades on their big stairs. They're all 6 inches apart. They don't have to go back in when they sell that house and bring them down to 4. But yet we had an inspector on a house that our church just sold. Oh no, you've got to turn those into 4-inch spacings. And that's wrong. So yeah, so in answer to your question, yeah, they don't.
So, different issue, we can take that up another time, but the point being is that
It is.
we do need, it is the same thing. We do need to find out where it's.
Mayor,
Councilman Hubert.
I'd like to butt in for just a second, and most especially for anyone that's watching this at home. You know, we use the term inspectors, and a lot of these inspectors that are inspecting these things for sales and for financing and a real estate sale and all that stuff, that is a whole lot different than an inspection that a city inspector comes in and does, because I have great confidence that our inspectors are indeed going in and applying the correct current code in a correct manner. But I have absolutely no confidence in some of these general, as you called them, Mr. Mayor, general home inspectors that are going out willy-nilly and trying to make a name for themselves. And I really want to make that clear on the record, and especially clear to anyone who's watching this. Please don't be confused when we use the term inspections and inspectors, because they're not all created equal. I have confidence in our city inspectors. I don't have any confidence in those other guys.
Okay, any other comments or discussion? Okay, any amendments to this? Any abstention or nay votes? All voting aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passed.
Please read the ordinance on second reading by title only.
An ordinance approving the annexation, plat, and subdivision agreement for the IDE addition to the City of Casper and zoning said addition C3 Central Business.
Chair would entertain a motion to approve on second reading the ordinance just read.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Councilman Johnson, second by Councilman Hopkins. Council will now listen to public comment. Public comments are limited to 5 minutes. No duplication of speakers will be allowed.
Mr. Mayor, I might be out of order here by asking this, but I note that Mr. Ide's here. I'm just dying to know. Bob, do you have any idea how it came to be that this property was never brought into the city? Doesn't matter.
The railroad.
Mayor, council members, thank you. Bob Ide, 3838 Garden Creek Road. That's a great question. I wondered that myself when it all came about. I briefly explained it when I was here the last time, and it was actually an old railroad, property over there, the way I understand it. And when I actually bought it, there was a meets and bounds description, and there was no, lot block. I didn't really pay that much attention to it. Everything else I've bought is essentially in the city, other than outside of the city, has a lot and block, but it was meets and bounds, and I just didn't really raise a red flag and bought the property, and it didn't really come up to be until I started a remodel here, and the building's been there for 60 years. First came up with Dan Elston. He wrote me a list of things that I needed to do to accomplish the building permit, and one of them was to get the property platted. And I was like, which parcel are you talking about? Anyway, it came to my knowledge also that there's other properties in that area also that are under the same, just, a meets and bounds description with no lot and block, and they've never been annexed to the city of Casper. And all I would ask for tonight is just a rebate on property taxes for the last 60 years. Anyway, does that answer your question, Councilman Huber?
Well, I guess as good as you can, and I apologize for interrupting things, but I was just dying to know if you knew how that came to be. I think I can guess, but.
Well, I think Fred Goodstein had a lot of pull back in the 1960s, being pillar of the community that he was, and I just don't think that the issue ever got pushed. That's all I can figure.
My suspicion it was just the force of inertia.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman Hopkins.
Kind of along the same line. First, Mr. Wright, I appreciate your patience tonight, but I think I've seen pictures when there was a train depot back in that neck of the woods. I think it was Southern Pacific, don't remember, but.
CNW, or I think.
Yeah, the Chicago Northwestern.
Yeah, Chicago Northwestern.
Yeah. Well, you probably remember it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the depot was on the south side of the rail trail right there. Yeah, there's old photos there.
Okay, any other discussion? Any amendments? And any abstention or nay votes? All voting aye?
Aye.
Please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passed.
Please read the ordinance on second reading by title only.
An ordinance vacating Tract G, Mesa del Sol addition as public parkland and approving a zone change of said parcel from Park Historic to R4 High Density Residential.
Chair would entertain a motion to approve on second reading the ordinance just read.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Cathy, second by Councilman Bates. Council will now listen to public comment. Public comments are limited to 5 minutes. No duplication of speakers will be allowed. Okay, with nobody to speak, discussion. All right, any amendments? Any abstention or nay votes? All voting aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passed.
The chair would entertain a motion to add an item to the agenda to permit council to consider a resolution approving the downtown open container area.
Your Honor, I move that council consider a resolution approving the downtown open container area.
That movement was made by Councilman Johnson. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilman Hopkins. Discussion. Okay, any abstention or nay votes?
I'll be voting no on that for reasons that I discussed in the work session.
Same.
Me too.
All voting aye?
Aye.
Aye. Please record the vote.
With Vice Mayor Lutz and Council Members Bates and Huber voting nay, motion to consider the resolution passed.
Okay. Council will now discuss a resolution for the downtown, open container area. Because this is not on the consent agenda, it will be open for discussion by council. Please read the resolution by title only.
A resolution approving the downtown open container area.
Chair would entertain a motion to approve the resolution just read.
So moved.
Moved by Councilman Johnson.
Second.
Second by Councilman Hopkins. Mr. City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Members of the council, with respect to the proposed ordinance that council could consider now that the agenda has been amended in this regard, the proposed open container area would be along the lines of what we discussed earlier, the picture of which is popping up on your screen as a reminder. Your resolution has some blanks in it, if you will, and staff would recommend the hours of between 5 p.m. and 10 p.m. on the dates of 8/21 through 8/22, of 8/28 through 8/29, as well as September 4th through September 7th, which is Labor Day weekend.
Okay. Any discussion? Councilman Huber.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I'll be voting no on this also. I think, that, you know, I'm all in favor of this area down here. I think this is a good idea. I think it's a good potential thing for the downtown and everything. I think a couple of things. This is just simply not the year to be encouraging these kind of activities and that kind of thing. People can talk about personal responsibility and that, oh, everybody will take responsibility for themselves. I don't know about the rest of you folks, but I get around town and I do not see enough of our population taking personal responsibility. I see a good many of our people doing it, but I see a lot of other people doing what I consider and what I think the health department and the health department guidelines would consider to be very risky behavior, totally ignoring social distancing, totally ignoring face coverings, totally ignoring everything that the science tells us would eradicate or, you know, protect us from the coronavirus. I just don't think this is the year to do this. I also don't think that doing it this late in the season is a productive thing. I do not like the idea of doing this kind of a thing as a, quote, experiment. I would rather see us just move forward with this, put this in place, and have it so that it can be there and merchants and everyone can rely on it as being something more than just an experiment. But I just don't think right now or this year is the time to do this.
The other, oh, Councilman Paul. Sorry, I can't.
I know I'm the tough one to see. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with everything that Councilman Huber just said, and I plan to offer an amendment that approves the creation of the area but eliminates those dates.
Okay. Well, a couple of comments I'm going to make. While I get what you're saying, that a lot of people aren't taking responsibility upon themselves, the health department has, for a fact, sat down and talked to a group here in town and is allowing 1,000 people in downtown Casper to have a concert here in about 3 weeks. And they put everything into effect that they needed to put into effect. So if the health department is not having a problem with 1,000 people at a concert for one night, I don't think they're going to have a big problem with people having open containers in the downtown area. And I don't think there's going to be 1,000 people having open containers down there. I think it's a good idea for us to at least get an idea of whether this is going to work or not. It gives us a basis to see if this is a good idea or a bad idea for next year. And I don't think we're too late. It's never too late. So, okay, any other discussion? Okay, amendments.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to offer an amendment that we approve the area but eliminate all of the dates from the proposed resolution.
So is your amendment to just leave it wide open from this point forward?
Create the area, but eliminate the specific dates so that it would be in place for next year. Is that correct?
If you eliminate the dates, it would just be open container 24-hour, 365.
Ah, thank you.
Yeah. Right now, the open container is the next 3 weekends essentially, on Friday and Saturday nights.
Okay. Thank you. I'm not sure how to go about this then. Is there a way for us to have an amendment that basically says we will create the area, but we will suspend creating any of the dates that it will be available?
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, if I might make a suggestion and ask Mr. Henley, I wonder if we could amend this and set a specific effective date that would accomplish what Councilman Powell is
Okay, there you go. That would be in.
wanting to.
I don't mean to butt in here, but I think we have specific dates that we're looking at, correct?
Correct. You know, so maybe there would be, take the dates out, but put in a first effective date of, you know, the spring or Memorial Day weekend of 2021, something like.
That would be
maybe
fine
you're looking to supplant the current dates as were proposed with a date, maybe the earliest date
Beginning
next.
Memorial Day of 2021. That would be fine with me if that works. I don't think it's going to pass, but that's my suggestion.
That would be the Friday prior to Memorial Day.
Thank you, that weekend.
So he,
Mr. Mayor, I wonder if Councilman Powell could kind of restate his amendment, and then if it's to my satisfaction, I'd be seconding it.
So I would replace the dates listed with Memorial Day weekend of 2021.
As the starting effective date.
Starting date, yes, thank you.
And I can second that.
I'm not sure where we're at here. But
yeah, I'm not either. Okay, so we have a first and a second on amendment, and you're basically saying don't do it at all this year, do it next year.
I want to discuss the amendment then. That's
Okay, so I have a first, and then I have a second with Councilman Huber. Discussion. Councilman Hopkins.
Thank you, sir. We're doing this delay because we're worried about COVID-19. We also have a Christmas parade coming up, you know, after Thanksgiving, and that's, you know, it's pretty much 2.5 months out. And the whole COVID-19 thing might look different in 2.5 months. And so what I would suggest is that if we want to eliminate the dates, but we're on record that if somebody wants to do something that weekend for the Christmas parade or something akin to it, we would still have it on the books to be able to do it. Somebody would just have to come and apply. Is that correct?
Correct.
So, but if we move it out a year from now, that seems to be a little overkill in my book, but just.
Yeah.
Any further discussion? Councilman Cassidy.
Along your lines, I'm not sure that for a Christmas parade, you really want to be out selling alcohol and things like that with the kids and everybody else. I think that's a poor mix as well, so.
There will be kids at these events too.
Although they were last year at the Christmas parade, there was people all over the place. This just makes it legal.
Oh, God.
I think Mr. City Attorney, correct me if I'm wrong, but this being brought up tonight is strictly for the next 3 weeks only.
Well, I think it was anticipated that it would be for the next 2
Anticipated for
weeks,
that.
but you can amend it on the floor to make it as you choose.
Okay.
So there's currently that amendment, I believe, on the floor.
Okay, any further discussion? Vice Mayor Lutz.
Well, I mean, the fact that we're obviously allowing a 1,000-person concert kind of changes where I was coming from initially. Is this enormous gathering concert on one of these weekends that we have designated?
Labor Day weekend.
Okay, yeah, no, I mean, that defeats what I was going for, so.
Councilman Bates.
I'll say it again. I was all about this being next year. I still am. I'm all for it. I'm for the change of where it was. I still have a problem with the paying the overtime for something of this sorts that could take place and happen or may not, not knowing and paying them additional money with our current budget situation. So I think it's a next year thing, and so I will back Councilman Powell on this, financially being responsible.
Any other discussion? Councilman Johnson.
I think this concert would be the perfect experiment weekend. And we should just go forward with the dates originally proposed.
The other thing I'm gonna add is that, we look at a bottom line dollar figure of what we think it's gonna cost us. But at the end of the day, if this is a non-issue and there's not a need for extra law enforcement downtown, then the cost is not gonna be where we think it might be in a worst case scenario. Every time we look at this and we have a dollar figure on here, that's a worst case scenario. So I just look at that. We're not being fiscally irresponsible. We're asking to look at this to see if it's going to work. If it fails in the first weekend, as far as I'm concerned, then we need to be discussing shutting it down. Simple as that. Councilman Johnson.
In my opinion, we've already experimented with this during the eclipse, and it worked out perfectly.
Okay, any further discussion on the amendments on the floor? So the amendment on the floor, just to recap, is to basically you're going to get rid of all dates and it moves to next year.
Moves to Memorial Day of next year.
Okay.
With the current.
With the current layout. Okay. So any abstention or nay votes on this?
Nay.
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 Or wait, no. I don't know what I'm doing.
Nay, okay. So everybody but Councilman Bates and Huber are nay on the end. Powell. So please record the vote. Oh, I guess, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
No.
It's contagious.
Mail in, I'll leave your ballots there.
Carter, we really need you down here.
Clear
All
as
right.
mud. My apologies.
Clear as mud, so can we record the vote or do we need to go through it again?
You got me confused on.
Okay, so a nay vote on this is saying that you do not want this to move forward and we're back to the original of it happening this year. So that's a nay vote. So all those that are either abstaining or a nay vote
On the amendment.
on the amendment, say nay or abstain.
Nay.
Nay.
The five.
Okay, and all those in favor of it moving forward to next year, say aye.
Aye.
So you have 3 ayes. Please record the vote.
Those in favor of the motion to amend were Hopkins, Bates, and Powell?
Nope.
And Huber.
Huber, Bates, and Powell.
Huber, Bates, and Powell.
Huber, Bates, and Powell, not Hopkins. So motion to amend fails, is that correct?
That's correct, yes. Okay. So back to the original motion. Any any further amendments? Any further discussion on the original? All right. Any abstention or nay votes on the original? Which is this for the weekends that we discussed? Yeah.
1,700 to 2,200, right?
17, yeah, 5 o'clock to 10 o'clock at night. So any abstention or nay votes on that?
To be consistent, nay.
I'll be voting no also.
Okay. And all voting aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so that time
With council members Huber and Powell voting nay, a motion to pass this resolution passed.
all right. Whew, that was painful.
My apologies to council, I should have been better prepared for that.
That's all right. Please read the consent resolution by title only.
Item 11A1, authorizing a lease with Midget Football. 11A2, establishing in-house engineering fees for capital projects. Item 11A3, authorizing a victim services grant. Item 11A4, a deed for 3 parcels set forth in ordinance number 22-95. Item 11A5, a deed for a portion of South Melrose Street. Item 11A6, a deed for an alley and land in the vicinity of the surgical center. Item 11A7, a memorandum of understanding for tree decorations with the Nicolayason. Item 11A8, purchasing of public safety equipment from Motorola. Item 11A9, a right-of-way license with Rohrbach. And item 11A10, Hogadon Bull Wheel Service with Highlander Ski Lift Services.
Chair would entertain a motion to adopt the consent resolutions just read.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Huber, second by Councilman Johnson. Mr. City Manager. Nothing? Okay. Any abstention or nay votes? All voting aye.
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 Please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passed.
At this time, we ask council members to bring forward relevant concerns or items of interest. Councilman Bates.
Thank you, Mayor. I have just three. One, Councilman Powell touched on it regarding the tethering. There are a lot of people that will take their dog in at night, 8 o'clock at night, put them in their little kennel, and leave them in their kennel without food or water in their garage or in a room or something like that until possibly 7, 8 o'clock in the morning. And then they let them out to go to the bathroom and then feed them and things like that. Now, nobody speaks of it because you don't see it. And frankly, we shouldn't get involved in that anyways, because that's entering people's private homes. But I want to point out that they don't put the food in with the dog in the kennel because they're going to spill the food in the water and then the food absorbs and they get it all over them and everything else. But nobody talks about that. And I like that Councilman Powell did bring that up, that which one's worse, the dog sitting in a kennel all night or when they go to work. Some of them put them in the kennel that for the 8, 10 hours they're gone to work without food and water, then take them out and take care of them from there. To me, it's the same as tethering. You're locking one in a cage, the other one is on a tether, and if you do it appropriately, there's nothing wrong with that, especially those responsible. So that's something I'd like people to think about when, or even you council, when we go to discuss next week about the animal and we talk about tethering. One you see, one you don't, but they're the same to a point. So as far as that goes. The other one is putting up campaign signs. I found a lot of rules and regs regarding that I was not aware of, and so I encourage anybody that makes it through the primaries to read those, get on the website and look those up and know what they are. And those that don't make it, you have 72 hours to remove your signs. That includes if you put posts up with big signs, you have to remove the post as well. Don't just leave it on people's property. So I just wanted to bring that up. And the last one is I just want to thank here the Women of Republic for every Monday at Washington Park, putting it, all the candidates from senators to commissioners to council and everything that they did, that was really awesome, and they did a really great job and a hard work at doing it. So I just wanted to give kudos to them and really appreciated them doing that. So that's it for me.
Councilman Huber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I share Councilman Bates' concern about people that just go out willy-nilly putting up campaign signs everywhere. And I would say this, folks, when you see a campaign sign on a public highway right-of-way, on a park, in places like that where obviously the candidate didn't have permission to go and put that up there, I think that tells you something about the character of that candidate. And I think people should take that into consideration when they choose who to vote for. I also, I have been called all kinds of things. I've been branded as the COVID guy. I have been vilified by people because they say, oh, you're just going nuts about this coronavirus business. I want to tell you something, tell you a little story. In 1979, I was walking across the street downtown and I got hit by a truck. Took the hit on my left chest. Within a couple of days, I was coughing out what I would describe as mountains of semi-coagulated blood. I know what it means to be sitting there and have pink frothy stuff coming up out of your mouth and nose because your lungs are 85% full of blood by volume. I know what it means to not be able to breathe because your lungs are full of blood. That is something that I would not wish on my worst enemy. I don't ever want to experience that again. And if anybody wants to know how pleasant that was, I'll tell them all about it. And so, yes, I am damn serious about people not getting infected with the COVID-19 because I don't want to see anybody suffer through what I went through then. And when somebody says, I can't breathe because of that kind of thing, that's different from having the sniffles or a cough or anything else. I'll stop ranting for a while now.
Councilman Pacheco.
I don't have anything.
Councilman Kathy.
Couple of things. This morning I went to a promotion ceremony for Mitch Hill and John Peterson. They were both promoted to sergeants today, and that was at 10 o'clock this morning. Very proud of those gentlemen. A lot of hard work went into that, according to what I understand, and those are our future leaders as we go forward in the police department. So again, I would like to say congratulations to those men and to all of those people that helped them out and mentored them along their way. We need to stand behind our people that protect us and help try to keep us safe. So that's the one thing, the big thing. Then two other things which are way down the list. First of all, on C Street, the speed limit changes about Park from 30 to 20. Does it really need to be 20 all the way the rest of the way into town? And could we look at getting that speed limit moved to 30 all the way down to Walcott? I notice he's writing. That's what I'm waiting for. And then,
Just thinking, here we go.
at the corner of King Boulevard / Midwest and Poplar. King Boulevard is on the west, Midwest is on the east. If you're going from east to west, there is a left turn lane and a straight and right turn lane. If you're going west to east, it's a right turn only, and left and straight are together. And it is terrible trying to get through that intersection if you're wanting to go straight through because of the left turners. And to me, that ought to be swapped around to where straight through and right turn should be together and left turn should be the separate lane. So I would like that looked into.
I agree. I do. I agree with that.
I drive around town.
That'll be fixed when we get the new street.
Do what?
It'll be fixed.
Oh, yeah, well, compared to the promotion of the police officers, yes. But in the other bigger scheme of things, no, they can move back up. So, and then we had a water board meeting today and there was nothing, well, the biggie is that we're producing a heck of a bunch of water. Plants running between 24 and 27 million gallons every day because of the watering. And so, I'm not sure whether people have got their water bills yet or not, but hang on to your hat, because if we're putting out that much water, water bills are going to be high, and it has nothing to do with bad meters. We're pumping it out. So that's the other thing I would pass on as well, is they will be high. But those are the four things I had. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Councilman Johnson.
Thank you, Your Honor. Well, I'm glad to be back home. I spent the last 10 days between Cheyenne and Guernsey for training, and it was miserably hot and very physically demanding. We actually did a 7-mile hike to the top of Medicine Bow Peak and back down one day. It was great. Oh, we did 7 round trip. It's the Army for you. Anyway, and then I just finished my second day of law school today, and I can tell you that Councilman Huber you weren't lying, and there's a lot of work involved in that. In the meantime, my phone blowing up about the cats, so I'm glad we're going to table that issue and come back and look at other options, because I really don't like criminalizing trivial things like that. So anyway, that's all I have tonight.
Councilman Powell.
Mr. Mayor, thought you all did a great job last week while my softball team was busy winning the Western National Championship in St. George, where it was 105 degrees, since you brought up the heat. So came back a few pounds lighter, but with a little hardware. So nothing else to report.
Councilman Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Talking about the water bills, I think I've seen more brown grass this year than I've ever seen in Casper. And it's, you know, it's because it's been hot and people don't want to spend the money on water. But in any case, just kind of another bright spot. When you look at the first 2 months of the fiscal year, we're almost $2 million ahead on our 1-cent taxes. And that's a good thing. Now, granted, what we're showing here is, what, July and August? Those collections were made a month before, so we're reporting a month behind, but the point is they're both positive. So
Great.
I'm encouraged. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Lutz.
Just reiterate, I know we talked about Carol Crump at the beginning of the meeting, but if anyone doesn't know her life's work, I highly recommend that you find a way to look into it, because she was truly devoted to this community, and that is an understatement. There isn't even a proper word to state how much she cared about Casper and how much she cared about our nonprofit services here. And so I just recommend anyone in the community that didn't know her personally to do some research on her, because if we could all be half of what Carol Crump was, we'd be amazing human beings.
Well, everybody stole my thunder, so I'll just reiterate the choices of the PD. I think were good choices, and one of them, second generation law enforcement. Of course, his whole family, uncles and everybody else have been law enforcement. So, all right. So that's all I have. The next meeting of the City Council will be a work session to be held at 4:30 p.m. Tuesday, August 25th, 2020, in the council chambers. And a regular council meeting to be held at 6 p.m. Tuesday, September 1st, 2020, in the council chambers. Notice of an executive session to take place at this date and during this meeting was given. We have matters to discuss regarding property, litigation, and personnel. Therefore, the chair would entertain a motion to adjourn into executive session, and at the conclusion of that executive session, to reconvene this regular meeting solely for purposes of adjournment of this regular meeting.
So moved.
Moved by Councilman Cathy. Second by Councilman Bates. There being a majority of members present, and a motion to adjourn into executive session having been moved and seconded, and that motion requiring a 2/3 majority of the council present. Any abstention or nay votes? All voting aye. Aye. Please record the vote.
All members voting aye, motion passed.
Greater than 2/3 majority of the council present voted in favor of the motion. We are hereby adjourned into executive session.